So one of the most exciting things about the new DLCs for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the fact that we're getting brand new Pokemon in them. Brand new Pokemon are always going to be one of the biggest and most exciting draws of any kind of Pokemon game or expansion in this case, and the fact that we have already seen 7 new Pokemon that go along with this DLC is extremely exciting because we obviously haven't seen everything that this DLC has to offer yet. And that is why, in today's video, I wanted to discuss every new Pokemon that we could be getting in the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC. I'm talking stuff that hasn't been announced yet that we could see based on various factors. I think we are actually in for a good amount of new Pokemon that we still have not seen yet to this point, and I'm excited to talk about them, so let's go ahead and get to it. So today's video couldn't have happened without support, and I am very grateful for the sponsor of this video who specializes in support, BetterHelp. Lots of things are obviously happening in the world and in our own individual lives, and regardless of who we are and what we're dealing with, it's always a good idea to reach out and ask for help when needed. BetterHelp can help you to get the help you need more conveniently and easily than ever, as it is the world's largest therapy service and is also 100% online. They have a network of over 25,000 licensed and experienced therapists who are able to help with a wide range of issues, and BetterHelp will get you partnered with one that best suits your needs. Simply answer a few questions about your needs and preferences, and BetterHelp will get you linked up with someone that is tailored to help you and what you are dealing with. You're able to talk with your therapist however you feel the most comfortable, whether it's video call, phone call, or even just texting, and you're also able to message your therapist at any time. You're even able to change therapists at any time if you feel like you need a better fit for no additional charge. So if that sounds like something that could benefit you, you can check out BetterHelp and give them a try at betterhelp.com/HHH, which is also linked in the description. You'll also get 10% off your first month with that link as well, so again, that's betterhelp.com/HHH. And a big thank you to them for supporting the channel. So when it comes to further new Pokemon that we could see be introduced in the Scarlet and Violet DLC that we haven't seen already, I think an obvious place to start is with the Paradox Legendary Beasts and Swords of Justice. With the announcement of the DLC came the introduction and reveal of 2 of these legendary Paradox Pokemon in the form of Walking Wake and Iron Leaves, and the assumption is that we're probably going to be getting Paradox forms for the rest of the legendary beasts and Swords of Justice as well, because it just doesn't make sense to do one of them without the others. I made a video a little while back where I created some designs for these potential Paradox Pokemon to illustrate what they could look like if we do indeed actually get them in the DLC, and I just feel like that there's a pretty strong likelihood that we are going to get them, and they are probably going to be one of the most likely Pokemon I talk about in this video to actually happen, simply because, like I said, I just can't really imagine Game Freak giving a new form to one of each of these trios of Pokemon, but not the rest, especially because we have 2 packs of DLC to get into that are obviously going to reveal some new stuff on top of what already has been announced. And given that Walking Wake and Iron Leaves were revealed alongside the DLC in particular, I would honestly be very, very surprised if we didn't get the rest of the legendary beasts and Swords of Justice as Paradox forms as well. Moving along though, another new type of Pokemon that I feel like we are very likely to get in these DLCs, to the point where I believe that it's almost a foregone conclusion, are new forms of Ogerpon and Terapagos. Ogerpon and Terapagos are the central legendaries of the Teal Mask and the Indigo Disc DLCs respectively, and as the central, essentially box art legendaries for these DLCs, there's obviously going to be a lot of attention put on them. And what happens when there's a lot of attention put on legendary Pokemon, and in particular, box art legendaries? A lot of the time, they get new forms. I also created some designs for these Pokemon as well and what these new forms could look like, which I did for an April Fool's video last week, which you should check out if you haven't yet. But basically, on top of all of these other factors that make new forms of these Pokemon likely, is the simple fact that these Pokemon's designs lend themselves heavily to the idea of new forms as well. First off, you got Ogerpon, whose whole deal is that it covers its face with a mask, and we can even see it partially unmasked in one of its official pieces of artwork, so it only stands to reason that we will most likely see this Pokemon at some point without its mask on, where we get to see its true face. So I feel like an unmasked form for Ogerpon is a pretty likely possibility. And likewise, when it comes to Terapagos, everyone was expecting this Pokemon to be big and bad and brutish, and it's just a little cute turtle thing. So I feel like, considering this Pokemon has so much to do and is basically the central focus of the entire plot of Scarlet and Violet as a whole, that it is also going to get another form as well, which essentially could very well possibly be its supercharged, superpowered, fully powered, true appearance, similar to other legendary Pokemon that have taken up similar roles in past generations, like Zygarde Complete Form, Ultra Necrozma, and Eternamax Eternatus. There's a lot of mystery still surrounding this Pokemon, but I feel like that is one thing that we can more or less count on happening in some way, shape, or form, and this design is an interpretation of what it could possibly look like, where it not only looks way stronger and way more powerful, but it also resembles that drawing of Terapagos from the Scarlet and Violet books as well, in order to kind of tie that in and bring this whole story full circle. So those are the Pokemon that I feel like are the most likely overall to be in this DLC that we haven't seen officially yet, but there are a number of other options as well that could legitimately happen too. Like, for instance, masked forms of Fezandipiti, Munkidori, and Okidogi. There's been a lot of rumblings and speculation about possible masked forms for these Pokemon in the Teal Mask DLC, simply because A, the central legendary of this part of the DLC obviously has a mask and could also potentially have a separate form of its own, and on top of that, in the live action portion of the Teal Mask trailer, we see these masks that resemble the Pokemon, but they also look slightly different, so this could be sort of a tease at an additional form for these Pokemon that is going to possibly involve a mask in some way, similar to the mask of Ogerpon. There have also been rumblings of possible terrestrial forms coming in this part of the DLC as well, and while I'm not really a rumor or a leak guy, so I haven't really looked into it myself, this could possibly tie in with this whole masked form idea as well, and we could potentially get new forms for Pokemon that they obtain once they terrestrialize. And this would actually make a lot of sense, because terrestrialization is the main central mechanic of this generation, but to this point it does not grant certain Pokemon brand new forms like the other central mechanics of previous generations have, such as with Gigantamaxing or Mega Evolutions. So it would be a very natural thing for terrestrialization to grant new forms to some Pokemon, and one way that could potentially be done is by giving these possible terrestrial forms to some of the starter Pokemon. One thing that I feel pretty good about when it comes to new Pokemon coming in these DLCs is that we very possibly could get new forms of some of the starter Pokemon, simply because we have gotten new starter forms or new features tied to the starter Pokemon in every generation since Generation 6. In X and Y and ORAS, we obviously got Kanto and Hoenn Megas. In Gen 7, we got the starter exclusive Z moves. In Generation 8, we got Kanto and Galar Gigantamax forms, and we even got regional variant starters in Legends Arceus. So it only stands to reason that we very possibly could get some new starter form or mechanic in the Gen 9 games as well, and since terrestrializing is the central mechanic and there's these rumors floating about as well, I would not be surprised at all if we got terrestrial forms for probably the Paldea starters, and if any other starters got it, probably the Kanto ones because, yeah, they're the Kanto ones. And this idea is something that we have not yet seen introduced to this point within this generation. So DLC could be a prime time to make it happen and keep this trend going. And speaking of various Pokemon forms, what other forms of Pokemon could we potentially see new Pokemon of in these DLCs? Like, for instance, regional variants. We got some new regional variants introduced in the Gen 8 DLC in the Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra, so could it happen again in the Gen 9 DLC? Well, never say never, but I honestly believe it's unlikely, simply due to the fact that the first part of the DLC, the Teal Mask, is not even taking place in Paldea, so we're probably not going to get Paldean forms in that part of the DLC, and the Indigo Disc DLC takes place at a school that's in the middle of the ocean, so it feels like this DLC as a whole is very much taking place in places that aren't Paldea, so I don't really feel like Paldean forms that we haven't seen yet are going to appear. Rather, in lieu of traditional regional variants, I think what we're more likely to see are more Paradox forms, such as the Paradox Legendary Beasts and Paradox Swords of Justice. Not only does this make sense because of what I previously mentioned with the introduction of Walking Wake and Iron Leaves, but it also makes sense because of the fact that this DLC in its entirety is known as the hidden treasure of Area 0, and Area 0 is the place where all of the Paradox Pokemon reside. So I feel like, in addition to the Legendary Beasts and Swords of Justice, we could potentially see a few more new Paradox forms for other Pokemon as well. And if the whole Terastal form idea actually does become a thing, given that we have not seen it in the games to this point, they're probably going to give it to a decent amount of new Pokemon, and that could possibly apply to other Pokemon as well outside of just the starters and Okidogi, Munkidori, and Pheasantipiti. It's also possible that we could see some just brand new Pokemon in general and ones that aren't a form of any other kind of Pokemon that's already been introduced. However, I feel like if this is going to happen, it's most likely going to be in the form of a legendary Pokemon, because we're kinda to the end game on Scarlet and Violet at this point. I don't think we're going to get any brand new Pokemon that are just regular Pokemon. I think if we do get any new ones, they're going to be important legendary type Pokemon. And this could happen because in the Sword and Shield DLC with the Crown Tundra, we obviously got the introduction of both the new Regis as well as Glastrier and Spectrier and the Galarian legendary birds. So I feel like we're going to see something similar in this DLC for the Gen 9 games, where we're potentially going to get those Paradox forms of the legendary beasts and Swords of Justice, and that will kind of fill the role of the Galarian birds and the Regis, and we could potentially get a couple legendaries here or there to go along with Terapagos as well, especially because Ogerpon, its counterpart legendary, has 3 other Pokemon of its own that tie in with it as well, and it seems like Terapagos is even more important to this DLC and the overall games than Ogerpon is. So I could see something similar to what happened with Calyrex happening with Terapagos. That, however, is a little more speculative than some of the other things I've talked about in this video, so take it for what it's worth. But overall, whether we do get new legendaries, or we do get new Paradox forms, or we get additional forms of Ogerpon and Terapagos, or Terastal forms, I definitely think we're in for a solid amount of new Pokemon that come in some way, shape, or form in these DLCs. And personally, as a fan of newly introduced Pokemon, I am very excited for that. But now you're gonna have to let me know what you guys think about all these ideas, and if these new potential Pokemon are ones that you would like to see, or if you have any other ideas for other new Pokemon as well. If you enjoyed the video as well, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new for more, and with that said, I will be back with another new video very soon. Until then, as always, thanks so much for watching this one. I honestly really appreciate it, and I will smell you guys later.